Hey, welcome back to Your Money in Real Estate. We're having an exciting time here with Richard Dolan. Now, Richard, before the break, we just started touching on, I guess, what you're excited about, which is, sharing the information on buying U.S. property. Now, you're the only guy so far on the show, and probably for the rest of the year, that we're going to talk about that, because you're right. I've been to a lot of these investing trade shows. I've been to a lot of these guys, Detroit and, Vegas and whatever. But tell me a little bit how you came about to say, you know what, hold on. We need to write a Bible, as you said, Brett Wilson calls it.
Yeah.
Tell us how you got to that point, or leading up to that.
Well, my good friend and partner David Franklin and I and my team, we were all looking at what we can do in terms of taking advantage as real estate investors in the U.S. And every seminar we would go to, it would be sort of the same routine. Someone would stand at the front of the room, talk about all the things that they know, and they were pretty much pretty good. But they had something to sell, and it was always specifically somewhere.
Right.
And when you lifted sort of the skirts, if it were, to the entire presentation, they were realtors. In the States.
Yeah, exactly right.
So they're American realtors and or American developers selling their stuff. And so I wasn't interested in going into this place or that place because they had a real true attachment to those particular places. And so as a result, we found, well, why is there no one talking about the entire states? There's people talking about Detroit, but I don't want to spend $15 a door and pray to God someone's going to collect rent. I don't want to go to Vegas where, yes, the deals are there, but no one's visiting there. I don't want to go to the places that are on sale based on one person's perspective. What's the perspective on the entire America? And so we came up with the thought of, let's create a retail access point for all Canadians, which was called the U.S. Property Shop, a one-stop shop for all things American.
Okay.
And so that way a Canadian can say, well, look, this is a very, very dire conversation. You got to worry about cross-border planning, tax, legal issues and implications.
I got a whole list of questions here. Yeah.
Of course, and most people do.
Speaking of which, just reminding people, this is a call-in show. And you know what? I see about 3 or 4 different books here. I think that maybe anyone who wants to call in, ask Richard those tough questions on investing in the U.S. Maybe we could give away a few books perhaps. So
absolutely.
Why don't we get some callers? The number's probably up on the screen. Give us a call. Ask Richard questions. Richard, didn't mean to cut you off,
No,
but I like
please.
to remind people about that.
That's
so
great.
You're getting into the whole U.S. property
a
shop.
holistical approach for all
Okay.
Canadians with a Canadian perspective, Canadian-based with a shop here in Toronto and a shop in Vancouver and Calgary and Edmonton. So we can serve Canadians at a very retail level. We don't buy any of those investments. We don't go and buy the foreclosed properties or the ones with the short liens on them or tax liens rather or short sales and then sell those inventories ourselves. We don't take a conflict of interest approach. We basically shop the market. So we've built relationships with vendors and developers, banks, and other resellers of these properties to find the best deal that best suits them. So we're almost like a financial advisor, if it were, for Canadian investors looking for either a home away from home at a discount or a cash flowing property, which might make a lot of sense for them. And that's exactly what the U.S. Property Shop's been doing, and that's exactly why this book has come out at the right time.
So if I understand, a little bit about, Don Campbell, he likes to talk about economic fundamentals. He likes to, to drill down to the 10 cities to invest in.
Sure.
Do you guys offer the same kind of thing in the U.S.? So you make recommendations, but you're not necessarily like a lot of U.S. retailers say, here, buy this listing that I have because it's a great property.
Yeah.
You would say, look, here's an economic fundamental. Is that the approach you're taking?
Absolutely, because most people don't know what's fundamentally happening down in the States. And so we've got feet on the street. I visit there on a monthly basis, and so does the rest of the team in various ways. David Franklin's on his way to Arizona. I just came back from Florida. We have current vendors here from Florida as of now, doing a seminar as we speak for clients of the U.S. Property Shop. But what we do is we talk about some of the other factors that are important that Don doesn't touch on. Things like the currency right now. It's currently at par. That's a powerful place to be.
Absolutely.
Things like credit availability. It's not available to Americans, and therefore they can't buy real estate the way they once did.
Well, let's stop on that for a second, because I got here, mortgages. Obviously, I've got people who were investing in the U.S.
Sure.
And they said, Mark, if you got a lot of money, you can get some great deals. You're not going to get a mortgage down there.
No, you're not.
So when you mention mortgages, tell me a bit about that.
Well, here's what's interesting. Let's debunk the myth right now.
Do it.
If you want to buy in the States right now, you're not going to have any financial institution dying to lend you money. The reality is that you've got Congress who's mandated those banks to really preserve their cash. Until the election, perhaps we'll see some of those things ease. Canadian banks right now, they really typically don't want to lend you money down in the States for investment purposes until some of their valuations shift. Best way that we've seen Canadians take advantage of that marketplace is simply either with cash or by use of a line of credit. Or you've got your home here that's likely gone up in value, you've got rates that have remained low. If you're making an investment into investment property, that interest is tax deductible, so it's a really great win-win for yourself. As time goes on, and as we've seen in the numbers, values have gone up. Mark, over the past 3 years by as much as 25% in some markets, maybe it's time when the banks allow you to refinance those homes, pull some equity off the table and pay down the line of credit.
Sure.
So all that's available to you. So the chance right now that you've got to go in and buy homes that would take about twice as much to build a home is now. But some markets have run dry of that inventory, so you've got to be careful where you're going.
Yeah, you touched a bit upon taxes, and I know I've heard, and again, debunking a myth. Florida, great place. Canadians love Florida. People from Toronto just love, So is there an extra tax that Canadians get?
Yeah, a whole bunch of it. And here's the thing.
Okay.
Few people know there's only one little small move you can make. And once you make that one small move that anyone can make, you really will end up having a lesser tax issue. And that's just basically electing to file a tax return. Most Canadians don't know that.
You just learned something, guys, about buying in Florida. So you're saying if you elect to file a tax return, those extra scary taxes, oh my God, I'm going to pay double than my neighbor.
The withholding tax and the paying of the double taxation is not being able to report the taxes that you've already paid in the States. And those American taxes that you pay to Uncle Sam are actually credited towards your Canadian taxes. So those aren't really the big issues. The big ones that we have to spend a lot of time with Canadians on is how do you take ownership? How do you take title? Because one of the things that most Canadians get, they jump on a plane, they go down with the missus or their husband, they find a place, they fall in love, and whether it's for personal use or investment purposes, the realtor says the absolute classic and likely most fitting thing, which is file your taxes, but first get yourself an LLC, a limited liability corporation, and put the title in that corporation. Here's the thing. Revenue Canada doesn't recognize the LLC as an entity. And so therefore, not only are you no longer now sheltering yourself from liability, you've got yourself a double taxation issue, all because of the way you took title. So the way you enter the market starts with your cross-border planning. How you take title, so your legal planning, and how you elect to file those taxes, so you can avoid double taxation.
So you're delving into a lot of technique here, and a lot of strategy that I'm assuming, hopefully, is very clearly in the book.
All in the book.
But you're basically saying before you do some stuff, get these things in line.
Absolutely. Look, the book is available for anyone who wants to buy it, e-copies, but we're not here to sell books. The reality is if you need it, buy it. If you don't. That advice is very easy to get. The challenge for most Canadians is that they have made $165 billion worth of U.S. residential purchases just in the past 3 years. And based on some of our soft estimates, most of that has been purchased by investors. Recognizing the dollar's at par, noticing that the credit is in fact very weak in the States, but also the chaos in the world. You know this, Mark, in the years that you've been in this business, when money starts being confronted by chaos, it does one of two things. It'll look for either opportunity or safety. Okay. Well, safety is right here in Canada. That's why we still have a building boom. But just south of the border, you've got opportunity. And international money that's looking for safer harbors is going into those markets. So the Brazilians who've seen their currency go up by about 48% in the past 18 months, they're all in Florida. When you take a look at what's going on in the Middle East, a lot of its money's exited, gone into the States.
Sure.
And when you look at what's going on in the Far East with inflationary scares, the government actually saying, hey, let's slow things down, money is heading into America and Canada in very large numbers. So when they buy these homes, when they buy these residential properties, the challenge isn't so much buying right and filing that ownership properly and taking care of your taxes accordingly. The biggest challenge is when do you now exit? When do you now refinance? And how am I now going to protect those assets over time so that you can actually weather any storms that might be coming down the next pipe?
Now, Richard, a lot of people who are getting into investing, they understand, location, they understand buying right. And you mentioned something very good, exit strategy. And I say the best exit strategy is to buy right. Right?
Bingo.
And so I've heard a lot of talk that 2008 was what, 5 years ago, 4 years ago,
Feels
5
like
years
forever.
ago. Has the market bottomed out, and is the right time now? Or because a lot of people are saying, myself included, tons of questions all the time.
Sure.
When is the right time to buy? When is the bottom going to come? Because I don't want to wait for the bottom to come. I want to buy now. So I say, look, you're right. Buy at the right time. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Warren Buffett, the greatest investor of our time, once said, it's only when the tide is out you'll notice who's been swimming naked. And I feel that same way with Canadian investors looking for opportunity. They're saying, hey, has it bottomed out yet?
You're right.
And the only time you know that something's bottomed out is when it starts to go back up. And so right now what we're noticing in key markets like Miami, like Fort Lauderdale, like Daytona, there's a massive recovery. And the uptick in value is coming from the depletion of the excess inventory, all the additional homes that were built leading up to the 2008 crash, but also to the fact that a lot of the foreigners are in fact buying in droves those inventories. So you've got Canada, which is leading the charge, followed by China, Mexico, and Central America. So right now, in terms of inventory, I believe we've reached the bottom.
Okay.
There's absolutely no more really left. I think we're at the bottom of the available foreclosures and short sales and tax liens. So there's no fire sale. I think the flames are out. But the reality is that the values are now increasing because the volume and the inventory is no longer what it once was. So we're back to 2001, 2002 levels.
Right.
You fly to Arizona, there's nothing for sale if you're looking for an investment property.
Wow.
You go to certain parts of Florida now, you're going to have a real challenge finding something in a great community that's going to deliver a nice high cap rate. So it's a real buyer's market if you're looking for a second home or a home away from home. But for investors, you've got to start really looking more carefully. So you're not going to buy into something that's going to cost you more and exit less versus getting smart.
Now, what about, we're talking basic supply and demand, which
Sure.
is economics 101.
Absolutely.
So with real estate, I like to tell people that, supply and demand, the rental market, because a lot of us are investors, that the rental market sort of goes up and down with that. Vacancy rates, when there's no supply, vacancy rates drop. When there's lots of supply, vacancy rates go up. You're saying that a lot of the supply has been bought up in Vancouver. Talk to me a little bit about renting. How do we pay? It's great to buy a property, but what if it sits empty?
Well, maybe internally you want to be in Vancouver, but we're talking about the States. But it's raining there now. We don't want to be in Vancouver.
No.
But that being said, though, in the States, we have a very different phenomenon that unfolded. And what you have is people who were able to afford their mortgages. They were able to afford their lifestyle. And what happened was the values in which they were mortgaged for went upside down. And so it no longer made logical sense for them to be making these payments for a home that was worth half of what they were mortgaged for.
Got it.
So these people who were walking away from their homes, it wasn't necessarily because they lost their jobs. It didn't make sense for them to make those mortgage payments. Let's put this in perspective. An American who can in fact file bankruptcy or be foreclosed on can in fact wipe their entire slate clean. It takes them only 3 years to recover. Now in those 3 years after good behavior, they can come back as a first-time home buyer. So guess what the minimum is on a down payment? 3.5%. Wow. So they can come back with their credit completely corrected in 3.5 years after filing bankruptcy. So think about it even one level deeper. If they were upside down on the mortgage relative to the value of the home, and they were able to in fact stay in the same house and pay a lesser rent based on the real value of that home, they're up some cash.
Sure.
And so the reality here is that when you talk about vacancy rates and where employment is, yes, there's an unemployment issue in the States, but that's a macro conversation. But in some micro communities, unlike Detroit, Michigan, as one example, or any other micro community that was very reliant upon small industry, like steel mills and auto manufacturers, you've got people who still need to live somewhere.
Sure.
And so it just happened that they filed bankruptcy, they've got no credit, but they're still employed. And so the folks who really took advantage of this downturn in the U.S. real estate market, especially the residential one, those took advantage of buying homes that were overpriced, that got really pummeled in value, and were able to buy them real cheap and rent them back to the same families that actually was living in them.
Wow.
And so that phenomenon is now evaporated. You've got most of about 4.5 million foreclosed families. Now there's rumors that there's more to come. There's rumors that the worst is not yet over. But the banks have now begun to put into place the protocols to help manage that process. So they're not going to let a huge flurry of new foreclosed homes to come back in the market because they can't afford to see that go offside.
Richard, you're getting excited, and so am I, because in the next series we're going to get into some numbers. We're going to get a little blackboard behind us. We'll be right back on Your Money in Real Estate with Richard Dolan.